Okay, today we're going to draw a Hellebore. So where do you start? Get yourself a piece of watercolour paper and a 2B pencil, and we're just going to look at our image and roughly draw out where we want the main flower, then the stem, and then we've got a couple of little buds, one there, and then you can add the leaves on. Look at the central flower. The centre of the flower is sitting just a little way up the circle of the main body of the flower. And then we've got a petal that comes across like that. We've got a petal that goes like that, and another one that comes down there, and then we've got this big one that's over the top of the flower, almost like that. Oops. Okay. Then you've got your little bud, which has a little cap on it almost. And then you've got another slightly more open bud. Use the structures that you've drawn just to guide you with your shapes. Okay, and then you can start adding your leaves on, like so. If you don't get all the leaves on, don't worry, just do as many as you can. Okay, so that's the basics of drawing out. If you like, you can draw this onto a piece of cartridge paper and then transfer it onto a piece of watercolour paper by tracing. What that does is it allows you to make a lot of mistakes, rub out a lot, redo things, and just gives you a little bit more time to think about what you're doing. If you work directly onto the watercolour paper, if you make any mistakes, use a putty rubber to rub out your mistakes. Whereas on the cartridge paper, you can just be as rough as you like with any kind of rubber and then trace it through onto your watercolour paper. And to do that, all you do is turn over your cartridge paper, rub pencil on the back, turn it back over on top of the watercolour paper, and press it through with a pen or a pencil. Okay, or if you've got tracing paper, you can use that. If you've got watercolour trace down paper, then also that's really good. You just put that between your cartridge paper and your watercolour paper. Okay, so the next thing you'll see is the flower drawn out onto watercolour paper, and I will have just undercoated it a little bit with a couple of colours. One is like a dark green colour, and the other one is a pale alizarin crimson. Okay. Okay, so this is stage 2 of this Hellebore. And if you remember, we have watercolour paper and we've undercoated the flower, the leaves and the stem. However, I did this quite a while ago and I put it away. It had the picture on top and it's got very dirty in storage. And I just thought I'd talk about how to get rid of marks. Okay, so I don't know what these marks are. They could be pencil, they could be crayon, they could be just dust, they could be flies, they could be watercolour, it could be anything. However, the first thing I reach for is a putty rubber, and this is a putty rubber, and as you can see it's quite dirty, and what you do is you use it, and then when it gets dirty like this, you just peel off the dirty bit and throw that away. Okay. This is the best rubber for removing marks on watercolour paper and watercolour paintings. Just make sure it's quite clean, and then just go over some of the marks and see if they are erasable. These putty rubbers you can get online, they're cheap, they last a long time, and you can see that they're easily removing these marks. Okay, so the putty rubber is good because it's a soft rubber. It's like putty, you can squeeze it. And that is really gentle on your watercolour paper. It also rubs out pencil. You can see that mark was there. And you know, you can use it on top of the colour as long as it's dry. Make sure it's dry before you rub all these marks out. And you can see that that has really cleaned up that paper back to normal. Now there is a stain here. I think some water must have run, and it's here a bit there as well. So with this, you can lift that off with your watercolour brush. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So use your putty rubber first and then work out what to do next. So if you did want to get rid of those stains, again, they can be on top of the painting or around. There's a few there. You might not be able to see these. I don't know. Let's just zoom in a bit. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a clean, wet brush and I'm putting some water on top. And then I'm just taking a rag or a piece of paper towel and I'm just dabbing it once. Don't rub it, because if you rub it, you'll irritate the paper. And don't put the water where you don't want it. And that should, it might take a couple of goes. The first one lifted up really easily. Sometimes you just need to let the paper up, the water absorb into the paper. So give it a couple of seconds and then try it again. Again, just press and lift. And you should see that that stain removes very slowly. Same up here. Let's try this one. Try not to get the water anywhere other than where the stain is. I've just dripped some there. I'm just going to soak up that before it makes a mark, because it will make a mark and it will spread the paint like it just did then. Okay. Just put the water where the marks are that you want to remove. Use a clean side of your paper towel, press it down, don't rub, just press and lift. And you can see that's faded ever so slightly. You can apply it again and try it again. You might not get it right back to the pure white of the paper, but it will lift a lot of it off. You can see that's gone. Okay, so there you go. There's a couple of tips on how to remove stains and marks on your paper. Okay, so let's finish this Hellebore. So like I said, we've got this green, we've got the dark crimson purple of the flower and the leaves, which I've undercoated in this brown colour. So literally the next thing to do is to just take darker mixes of the colours that we used. So whether it's alizarin crimson or purple, you know, if you've got a Hellebore in your garden, you might not have them at the moment because it's at the end of spring, but there are loads of images online which you can use, and we're literally going to go in and we're going to darken up. First of all, we're going to darken up the areas in shade. So underneath those petals where it's really, really dark, we need to put, in fact, this needs to be even darker than what I've got it. So I'm going to put some purple in. Now the areas of the sepals and things like that, what I would do with those is I would leave the odd mark here and there free of colour. And then if you end up removing too much of the lighter areas than actually that you wanted, then you can always pop them back in with a bit of gouache. Okay, so there's the shadow. Again, I'm just going to work around that central. It's very difficult to paint that central section without covering up the marks that you're making, that you want to reserve. So like I said, just be kind to yourself and just try your best with those marks. And all I'm doing now is I'm just going round the outer edge of those marks that I put down, that paint that I put down, and I'm just applying a little water just to blend it into the colour that we've got underneath. Okay, now there's a stronger patch here also, but again it goes light and dark, so just be aware of where it goes light and dark. Add a dot of purple here and there just to strengthen that colour up, but remember to blend the colour into the rest of the area that you're filling in. So for example, where this line is quite hard on the edge, if you want to soften it, just take a clean wet brush and just push that colour around on that edge, and it will soften into the background like that. Okay, also up here like that. We've got a little bit of darkness just underneath this lip here where this petal overlaps. And then the petal above is very light, but it still has an element of colour there. So we can just sort of carefully go in fairly light to begin with, because you want this to remain light in colour. You don't want it to be too strong. You want it to raise above the petals below, and just add extra pigment as and when it's needed. The one behind is a bud, so I'm going to put a very strong red in there. This is alizarin crimson, like that. I'm going to add a dot of purple on this side where it's darker, just here like that. Not much, you don't need much, just on the underside. It's almost to create a shadow. And then back into that alizarin crimson just for this top section here, and it fades off to almost nothing like that. Okay, you might want to darken that up again another time. So we move over to here. In watercolour you work in layers, so you get a layer of colour down and then move on to the next section, sort that one out, and then when you come back to look at your image again, you can see whether it's dried too light or too dark for your picture, and you can then apply another coat to your picture. So we've got this. Oh, this is this is another petal here, isn't it? So we need another like that. Okay, now this bud, which is just about to open, is in the distance, so don't apply too much strong. I've got a little bit here, but we don't want the pigment to be too strong because we don't want it to fight with the foreground flower. We want the foreground flower to be the focus of attention in our composition. So what you do is, when you're doing things that are further away, you tend to just add a little bit of colour, but not too much, and make it less strong, so that we don't draw attention away from the main focus, which is this. So I'm going to go back in, and I'm just going to put a dark purple around the centre of this structure that's in the middle, like that. And then I need to put a pale version just in the middle, sort of purple colour. And then I'm just going to paint some stripes over that light area there. You can see how it's faded almost to nothing. So we need to go back in and put more pigment in. So I'm going to take the red, I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to put that in around this area here, down to here, and up there again. I'm also going to extend it underneath. The darker you make these sections, the more that these lighter sections will project away from the centre of the flower. So, you know, it's important that they're dark enough to get that projection working properly. So again, there's a bit of an area of purple here, so I'm just going to pop that in there and a bit more in here, like that. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to soften the edges with a clean, damp brush. Okay, so you're basically just building up like that until you get the flower to the level of colour that you require. Now the leaves are a different thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a coat of really pale, alizarin crimson, and all you do is to make it pale, rather than adding white, don't add white to your pigment. It really doesn't work. All we're going to do is we're going to just paint a pale red, alizarin crimson. See how pink that is? We want that over each flower. Sorry, over each leaf, like this. Okay, you can do some slightly darker and some slightly lighter, but try and keep it pale. The reason being is that we're going to do some negative painting, and you'll see that I will do some leaves using the negative painting technique, but I'm not going to do them all. You only need a suggestion. With all painting, you don't need to go into detail on every surface. In fact, it helps if you don't do that. Okay, so pick out a few leaves that you really like, darken them up, lighten them up, whatever they need doing. So I'm going to go for this one here. I'll show you how to do one, and then I'll put it on time lapse and you can just have a play around yourself. And I'm just going to put a little bit of colour, extra colour, on that leaf, and also just put in a bit of shadow where that leaf comes over the top, and a bit of shadow here, so that which will be cast by the flower head itself. Okay, you let that dry. Let's go to the next one. Let's go up here to a slightly lighter one, but underneath we need to put in a dark area. Again, this is shadow cast by the various things around it, around the leaves. Okay, so this is shadow, and again, look closely at the leaf structure and see where there are darker segments. There's one there. There's this one is quite dark, and it's pretty much on all of the leaf. So I'm just going to put in a section like this. So that's stage one, and then by the time you've done this, hopefully the one lower down will be dry. And this one's very light, but we've got a curl coming over there which is darker. Okay, so the next thing to do, let me just carry on because this one is still not dry. I need this one to be dry so I can show you what to do next. So again, I'm going to go in here. Now the Hellebore leaves tend to be purpley red in tone, but they are green. So it's up to you to decide what colour. I mean, you might have found another image online that you want to use. So obviously go with those colours that you're seeing on that image. But if you are using the image that I sent you, depending on how well it prints out, mine printed out really badly. So I'm just sort of trying to recall really what's in my garden, and I know that the hellebores that I've got in my garden, the leaves are very red in colour, but they're like a red green, so you need to apply that. That was a bit dark. Just going to take a bit of it off, smooth it into that area there, but it will help that stand out, so I'm going to leave a bit of it. I'm going to come down here and darken this one up because this one's sitting underneath the other one, and it's this definition that will help with your hellebores and help them stand out mainly from the leafy background. Okay, that one's quite light, but I think it's been bleached out by the photocopying process actually. And this one is dark also. So I'm going to put a bit of darkness, an extra bit of darkness on here over the whole thing. Okay, so by now this should be dry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a really detailed brush like this. I don't know whether you can see that. There, yeah. Okay, and we need to mix up the dark vein colour. So I'm just going to take some purple and some alizarin crimson. I'm going to mix them together, really quite thick, less water here. And we're just going to pop in a central vein like that. Try not to get too much paint on your brush, and try and make these veins lighter as they, well, thinner and lighter as they come out from the edge, from the centre of your structure. So put a few veins on. Now don't drive yourself mad with this. You know, it's not a competition as to how to get veins onto these leaves. And you can see that one is still wet, so it's bleeding. So make sure that you wait until your leaves have dried, until you start doing this bit of the project. Okay, so that's how you do it. The next thing is to just get a pale colour of that same colour. So use a bit of the purple and pick up a bit of gouache. So we've got white gouache. You can use white watercolour if you want to, but you need a liquid version of that dark vein colour mixed with a bit of gouache. Okay, and you're just going to just put the odd little bit of light colour onto this leaf. So you can see that's quite white. Now the thing is with gouache is it does dry a little bit lighter. So do a test on one leaf and see if it's too light. You know, if it is too light, then knock it back a bit. You can also use it to create highlights around the edges like that. You can also put the paint on while it's still So can you see like that? You can also use the same pigment to go around the edges of your petals, and even where you've lost a bit of white, like up here, and you want to retrieve it, just put a little bit. Look at the way the marks are made on the petal. If you put the marks in the right direction, using the right sort of curvy marks, then you're likely to get more of a natural result. And you can see it's sort of sinking in. So if it's not strong enough, you can apply another coat like that. But don't go overboard with this. Okay, you can see that's worked okay. I'm just going to put a little bit of white on the top of here, like that. And you can also go in and do these details in the center. But you wouldn't do this. I'm just doing it so you can see how it works, but you wouldn't necessarily do this until you'd finished, because you need to make sure that the underneath is solid. Okay, so I'm going to put this on time lapse so you can see it build up, and then I'll speak again at the end. Okay, so there it is, more or less finished. I've just spent the last sort of half an hour just putting in very dark darks and light lights, veins, a little bit of pattern just on this foreground petal here, a little bit of darkness on the stem. Okay, so I hope you enjoy it. The only other thing you can do is to carry on darkening and darkening and darkening until you get those real deep colours. And also, if you wanted to, you could put some colour in the background. Okay, hope you enjoy it. Again, if you've got a flower to work from real life, then that's great. Obviously, it does cause problems when it's the end of spring and most of the hellebores have gone over, but I still have some in my garden, and I've still got some that have got berries on them, so even that would be really beautiful to paint. If not, choose another flower. If you don't want to use watercolour, feel free to use acrylic. Just follow the same instructions, work light to dark, and you shouldn't go wrong. The only thing with acrylic is that you can put white acrylic on top afterwards, whereas with watercolour you have to use white gouache. Okay, hope you enjoy. See you next time. Bye for now.